Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
So it's Thursday morning.
It is. I went to see Karate Kid last night.
So is this a movie?
There were 6 of us in the theater. 3 of them were us. Not you and me, but me and 2 of my buddies. So I went to this thing where they showed. So there's a new show called Cobra Kai that stars the real Johnny Lawrence and the real Daniel LaRussa 34 years later. And it's surprisingly good. And it's going to be on YouTube Red, which is, I guess, YouTube's subscription channel, which I was unaware of until yesterday. And we watched the first 2 episodes of that, which debut May 2nd. And then they showed on the big screen the original Karate Kid movie from start to finish. So I watched all of that. And I think I'm ready to endorse the Cobra Kai TV show.
So you like the TV show, and does the original Karate Kid hold up, 30 years later?
Oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah. Maybe better than I remember. So you got to remember, I've showed it to my kids a couple times, so I've seen it fairly recently. But on the big screen, the magic comes alive. the late great Pat Morita is fabulous, and I think also as a more mature person, I think I appreciated more the Pat Morita story. The Mr. Miyagi storyline and the friendship, and also how young Elizabeth Shue and Daniel LaRussa and Johnny, like how young they looked at the time. It's unbelievable. Well, because I was like probably 5 years younger than them, so for me they were always like big teenage high school kids, and I was like, like an elementary school kid or something. But now you're looking, it's like those are like babies. So anyway, check out Cobra Kai though. I think it's worth, especially if you're a Gen X person. If you like the original show, it sort of reminded me of the Roseanne reboot in the sense that it's like legitimately. I mean, I'm sure some of it's a little bit kitschy, but like it's not just. It seems to me that it used to be whenever they would do like a Return to the Brady Bunch or Return to Gilligan's Island or whatever. It was always really crappy. And now these reboots are like legitimately well done, well produced, well written. So anyway,
but I have to subscribe to YouTube Red to watch.
Yes, but I think again, I'm not getting any money off of this. I didn't know that YouTube Red existed until 12 hours ago. But I think you can sign up for a trial run for free and see for a couple episodes of this. So check that out.
But the idea is obviously to lure you into keeping a subscription.
Yes. And while I'm plugging stuff, Bill, I wrote about this in my newsletter, Matt Lewis and the Newsletter. Have you seen this this Netflix documentary? It's like a 6-part series called Wild Wild Country.
I've not.
It's about this cult in Oregon, which I didn't even know about. Did you know about this cult, the Rajesh Puram or something? I think they were called.
I don't.
So it's a crazy story, but this cult took over a city in Oregon. They brought in all these homeless people to try to take over the whole county. They poisoned like 700 people in a neighboring town. It's insane. So if I'm plugging shows, that check out those things.
All right,
and go Orioles.
So it's Thursday morning. We've already witnessed the withdrawal of the Ronny Jackson nomination to head the VA, and Donald Trump's ranting interview on Fox and Friends. Which I haven't watched myself. I've just seen some of the quotes.
Me too. I was on New Day while this was happening, so I've seen the clips and I've heard what he said, but I haven't actually sat down and watched the full Fox and Friends segment.
I did see Stormy Daniels' lawyer tweet out his thanks for Fox and Friends for such an illuminating interview. But
wasn't it you, Bill Scher, who argued that Fox and Friends? No, granted. Now the only interviews Trump does are to Fox and Friends, so it skews things a bit. But at one point, didn't you point out that the Fox interviews were actually the most dangerous for Trump?
Well, I had a piece back in the primary about all the Republicans should be fearful of the Fox News run debates.
That's right. And as we tape this, Scott Pruitt is going to be testifying before Congress, and he had an interview with Fox's Ed Henry a couple weeks ago that was not great for him.
Although, my warning back then was, look, Chris Wallace and Brett Baer and Megyn Kelly, these are folks who there's a pattern of them blindsiding Republicans who are expecting a soft interview. Fox and Friends is usually pretty safe territory.
No, I will not stand. I stack Steve Doocy up against anybody.
But the danger with the Fox and Friends is you're too comfortable.
Exactly.
You're just amongst friends and you go off.
Yeah, I was just listening to speaking of friends, our friend Jamie Weinstein was interviewing Ben Smith of BuzzFeed, and one of the questions that Jamie asked BuzzFeed Ben was, if you had a chance to interview Trump, what would you ask him? And for me, he didn't really have a satisfying answer, but for me, it's not what would you ask him. I would let him talk. Mm-hmm. I think as somebody who does podcast interviews, the key with someone like Trump would be you just do it long form. Mm-hmm. Let him talk, and that'll bring up questions. That'll expose. I don't think you go into it saying this is the question.
Right. Although apparently Fox
leap in the net will appear.
Apparently Fox cut off the interview.
Okay, and I saw that clip.
And someone tweeted out like, at another network, you'd be whispering the host ear, "Let him go. We're making news. Don't stop."
Okay. So here's the thing. What is it? Never attribute malice when incompetence is the better answer. In fairness to Fox and Friends, Trump had been talking for a long time, and he had been sort of talking nonsense for a long time, and then he starts to actually say things that really could get him in trouble, and then they cut him off. I think it's plausible that they were just out of time, and they didn't realize that
What out of time? You're a 24/7 news network. You have nothing but time.
Okay, I will agree. Look, when Michael Cohen did the rounds and went on all those shows, they basically said, we're not doing commercials, right? Screw it. We're not doing commercials. Just let this guy, if he's going to say crazy stuff, just let him keep talking. So I get what you're saying. I'm just saying I think it's within the realm of possibility that they didn't realize, I'm not convinced that they were trying to do him a favor by stopping him from saying something stupid.
But it was a really important panda story they just had to get to at 9 sharp.
You're talking to a guy who was once bumped off of a cable, not Fox, off of a cable hit because there was a mountain lion on the loose in a San Diego neighborhood. So, who knows what drives ratings these days.
But to get back to the Ronny Jackson debacle, which I think the basic storyline is well understood at this point. The guy was not vetted properly. He never had any business being named to the VA just because you're a doctor doesn't mean you can manage a massive governmental bureaucracy that has always been a challenging bureaucracy to run. But in the Fox and Friends interview, Trump says that Senator John Tester is going to pay a price in Montana for going on TV and calling Dr. Jackson the candy man for dispensing sleeping pills and whatnot very, very readily as White House physician. And
three pop culture references that come to mind. James Taylor, The Grateful Dead, and Happy Days.
But so Tester's running for re-election in Montana. It would be for his third term. It's very much a red state. Trump won it handily, but it does have a Democratic governor. Tester won both of his past races with less than 50% of the vote, so he's certainly a vulnerable target for Republicans. But Tester has also been a very crafty and wily politician. He's got ads running that it's always ads showing him being in Montana and not Washington. He's always making fun of Washington. He shows off his missing fingers from the farm accident he had when he was a kid. He still runs a farm. He has ads showing up all the bills he passed that Trump has signed. He's not running an anti-Trump campaign. And before all this, he was running ads showing how he has always fought for veterans. How is this not Tester saying, I again have protected veterans from an unqualified person running the VA? How does Trump make this a negative for Tester?
I think you make a valid point. I mean, obviously Trump is popular in Montana, and presumably if he were to criticize Tester, it could matter to some degree, but I think you're basically right. Tester fits the district. He comes across as a regular kind of guy. I think it's certainly plausible that he could argue that he was looking out for veterans here. So I don't, this is probably just Trump being Trump. I would say though, if you put aside the potential political consequences, which I think are probably minimal. Sorry, I'm dealing with the thing with my kids. If you put those aside, I think that it does. So I'm not sure exactly. So Ronny Jackson was not qualified for this job to begin with, right? That was my beef all along, right? But then these allegations were sort of leaked, I guess, from Tester. About him, all the things that you just described, right? Giving out medicine like candy, being drunk, stuff like that. It seems unseemly the way that was leaked and the way that the press just sort of took it and put it out there. It's not at all clear to me that these things are even true. Again, I thought that Jackson should have withdrawn his nomination, or shouldn't have been nominated to begin with, based on his lack of experience at running a huge bureaucracy. But it seems a little bit skeevy the way that this was handled, and it doesn't make me think more. It does not make me think more highly of Tester. I'll tell you that.
You think he was grandstanding?
Not grandstanding. So you tell me. I may have missed part of the story, but it seems to me like Tester leaked this alleged information that has not been corroborated to the press about a guy who had a pretty sterling reputation according to Barack Obama, according to George W. Bush, and that seems a little bit scummy to me. And that's just my impression right now. Maybe it turns out that this guy is, a horrible drunk and a hack or a quack doctor. I mean, who knows? Like, we see through a glass darkly. But it feels like this was a hit job. But look, I opposed him based on his lack of qualifications. But the way that my assumption here is that Tester leaked this information. That's uncorroborated allegations to the press. It just feels a little bit smarmy to me.
Forgive me if I'm getting the chronology wrong. I wouldn't call it a leak. I mean, Tester went on TV. I mean, he announced it. It's not like he slipped something under the door. He put his name on. He put his face and name on what he was arguing.
All right. So I missed, and I apologize, Mike. As you know, Bill, we talked earlier. My son is sick at school, and someone's going to pick him up, but we're going to cut this short. So and there's the Karate Kid hangover too. I'm a little bit sleep deprived, but thank you for clarifying that. But
one thing I wanted to say there is, I believe Tester didn't go on TV until after it was a joint decision at the committee level to suspend the hearing indefinitely. So I don't know who brought the information to the committee at first and what Tester's role in that was, but whatever it was, Republicans and Democrats agreed, okay, we got to go check this stuff out. So there was enough of a concern that it wasn't just Tester by himself. And so I've heard Yeah, I saw one tweet. I think maybe you even tweeted this out, not yourself, but retweeting it. Say, well, if a Republican had floated on corroborated charges about a Democratic candidate, the media would attack the Republican for spreading rumor and gossip. Not if Democrats suspended the hearing. I mean, if there's a joint decision to say, whoa, let's not even schedule this hearing because this is hot stuff, that media reaction would have been exactly the same. If the Republican giving it credence, which is what made this spiral out of control.
Well, I think that part of the story here is that people like me who might have been defending Jackson, had he been a qualified nominee, are not going to expend any capital in doing so, because irregardless of whether or not these allegations are true, he's not qualified, and he should, for this job. So I think that maybe factors into the calculus here. But
if you had a guy who was a exceptional government bureaucrat or an exceptional corporate leader who is known as a turnaround artist of some sort, and it was all excited for him to go and clean up the VA, people might be more inclined to say, okay, the guy got drunk once, we all make mistakes, let's look at the broader picture here. But this is a guy who had no business. I don't even know why he accepted the offer.
Right. That brings to light something I've been talking about on CNN a lot, which is the Rick Wilson, the Republican strategist, has a book coming out called "Everything Trump Touches Dies," and there does seem to be this sort of reverse Midas touch, right, where everybody except for Nikki Haley, who gets around Donald Trump, ends up really worse for the wear. I mean, we have people who had sterling reputations in the past end up having those reputations besmirched. You have other people that are promoted, and it's actually a disservice to them, right? So they're not ready to be promoted, or in some cases it's just a spotlight that they're not ready for. And this is a pattern, and it's a trend. And it's a shame because this is a guy who, at one point, Barack Obama and George W. Bush were raving about, and now his reputation is in tatters. And part of the problem is that Donald Trump has this pattern. Like he wanted to make his personal pilot head of the FAA. His golf caddy is now an assistant to the president. I mean, Hope Hicks started off, I think, doing PR for Ivanka's fashion line. He finds people that he likes personally that show a certain deference and loyalty to him, and he there's a Peter principle involved.
It's one thing to do it for a personal aid of some sort, and I understand that Trump is not someone who takes the responsibilities of governance seriously and wants to hand out political positions like candy. But if you're Dr. Jackson, you've got a pretty sweet gig as White House physician.
Yeah.
Why would you want to be on the hot seat of a scandal-ridden, sprawling bureaucracy that has already destroyed the reputations of the last two predecessors?
Right. And I think this is actually a really good piece of advice. I listened to this podcast recently that I recommend. It's called The Edge of Fame. And there was an episode called How Hanson Beat the System. It's about the 90s boy band Hanson. And basically, they turned down, after Bop came out. And by the way, I'm too old to, I was not caught up in the Hanson mania. I'm more of a new kids generation. Although I thought they were douchebags too. But be that as it may. But they turned down doing a follow-up album, and they didn't do it for a few years. They wanted to go out. And so the point of this podcast is that Hanson said no to the record industry, said, we want you to come out and put out a follow-up album right now. And they said no. And it actually, in the short term, hurt their careers, but in the long term, they're actually happy and successful. And they still have, they didn't spiral out of control. They're not drug addicts. They still have plenty of money. They've got beautiful wives and a lot of kids, and they're doing better, right? Someone told me, I should independently verify this, but someone told me that the New York Times tried to hire Ta-Nehisi Coates a few years ago, and he turned them down.
Yes, that is correct.
Which is really hard to do. If the New York Times tried to hire you as a columnist and you say thanks but no thanks, but think about it, Kevin Williamson, like maybe that's what he should have done, right? Instead of so when the Atlantic,
I think Kevin Williamson's gonna come out all right after all this.
Well, yeah, and sometimes scandals help people; they actually make you more popular and notable. But my point is, almost everybody, when you have the chance to seize the brass ring, almost everybody says yes, right? But then you have the Peter principle. And you also have the thing where, like, okay, what if Paul Manafort hadn't managed Donald Trump's, hadn't managed a presidential campaign? Would he have been better off today? Right? So I feel like we are so, especially people in this business where, you know, politics, journalism, where you have to be ambitious. You basically say yes to opportunities. I think that there's a, you know, sometimes we should rethink that. And there are these occasions where people like Ta-Nehisi Coates and Hansen go against the grain and actually say no to something, which is like almost never happens. And I think they probably deserve more credit than like that. That is such a counter-cultural move, and it goes against everything that our culture tells us to do. Ronny Jackson should have said, thanks, but no thanks.
Well, let me ask you a different question, though. So before, you know, Trump obviously does not do his due diligence when making appointments, and there's plenty of unqualified people in positions that they shouldn't be in. But remember, George Bush had Brownie at the head of FEMA.
Yeah.
There seems to be a lack of interest going back a ways for putting people in government posts with proper government experience on the conservative side. You know, when Bill Clinton was running for president and George H.W. Bush was getting dinged for his handling of Hurricane Andrew, Clinton writes about this in his autobiography. He said, I made a mental note at the time, I'm not going to get elected because of how well I handled a national disaster, but I sure could well get fired. I sure could lose an election if I mishandle a natural disaster. So I'm going to make sure that I put someone who has emergency preparedness experience in FEMA, and that was James Lee Witt, if I remember his name correct. And he did a wonderful job. Bush comes in and does Michael Brown, who does a terrible job. You know, Obama puts in another qualified person for FEMA, and it's like, this seems to be an obvious lesson that you recruit qualified people who vet properly before you put them into positions, even if that maybe takes a bit of time. You don't treat it like the government's your personal playpen to hand out favors to people. And yet, you know, Trump, I mean, I can understand Trump not absorbing this lesson because he doesn't absorb a lot of lessons. But is there anything going on in the Republican Party, in the conservative movement that says, okay, next time, guys, next time?
No, I think this is like the obvious conclusion of an attitude, a philosophy which says that expertise doesn't matter. And so I think that within conservatism, generally speaking, there is a sense that you know, expertise is sort of overrated. At least in the current incarnation of conservatism. So I wrote about that in my book, Too Numb to Fail. I think that's problematic. I think there's a sense that like good old-fashioned horse sense and common sense are what work. That the bureaucrats and the experts can't figure anything out. There's too much red tape. These guys are too passive or too wedded to the old ways. And I mean there are elements of truth to that.
I mean you can hire someone who's an outsider who wants to shake things up, but they better be good at shaking things up.
Yeah. Right. No, I totally agree. So like a Mitt Romney might have been like an interesting choice. You know what I'm saying? For some sort of a bureaucracy. Like, so here's a guy who had experience running a large, sort of operation, although his experience is probably overrated as well. But to take people who don't have experience running a large bureaucracy and thrust them into that is it opens the door for problems. And I think with Donald Trump, there's an additional sort of aspect to this, where there really is just a belief that like none of these this isn't rocket science. The so-called experts, the best and the brightest, they get us in these messes. We just need people that I like and trust and look like they could do the job, right? That matters to Donald Trump if they look the part and if I have a good gut feeling about them. Like, these are not metrics for hiring. Now, if I were Donald Trump, my philosophy would be it's sort of the same reason that I thought Hillary should pick sort of like a boring dude as her running mate, which is like, I'm enough change for we don't need to double down on change, like I'm enough change. And so I thought with Trump, originally I thought Trump should pick Newt Gingrich as his running mate, which would just sort of double down on the outsider image. And he ends up with Mike Pence, which is a message is like, look, I'm enough. We don't need more, like, I'm enough change. I'm enough shaking things up. And so for me, my philosophy would be like, all right, Trump, you're enough of like an outsider. You need to surround yourself with like capable people to sort of make up the difference.
Let me shift gears a bit. I have a piece up in Real Clear Politics this week suggesting conservatives have gotten all they're going to get out of Trump. You've talked in the past about, conservatives they may not love Trump, but they're sure happy they got Neil Gorsuch, and they're sure happy that they are getting tax reform. So it's painful to go through all the other baggage that Trump carries, but at least we got that. Sure, better than having Hillary Clinton being president and getting none of that. And there is just a cold utilitarian logic to that point. But from this vantage point going forward, there's no policy in the pipeline. And it's almost a certainty that Democrats are going to take the House. So even if the Republicans hold the Senate, you're not going to get very much through over the next 2 years after that. And then you look at, well, he can still deregulate. He can still nominate judges so long as Republicans keep the Senate. Well, a lot of the deregulation that's being pushed is getting blocked by the courts because it's being done in such a ham-fisted, sloppy manner that doesn't follow proper procedure. And even the judges, they talked about this a little bit last week, Trump's pace right now is not that great. I mean, it might pick up because there are about 30 or so who have cleared committee that McConnell wants to get through, but it's still slow going because there's a certain amount of time you need to do for floor time for each nominee. And when you're doing a judge's nominee, then you're not doing other stuff on the floor. Now, maybe they got nothing else to do, really, so they can clear the decks. So, but even if they got all 30 that are just ready to go, it would be a pretty good year for Trump, but it wouldn't be the best year of all time. And it's not clear that you would maintain that pace over the course of the next 4 years. So,
that's why we need Clarence Thomas needs to resign tomorrow.
So, Bush and Obama both got about 330 judges over an 8-year period. It's possible that if Trump was around for 8 years, he could exceed that. Although I think things would really have to pick up the pace and you'd have to really not do a lot of other things in the Senate. But in all likelihood, you're going to do maybe as well, maybe a little bit better over a 4-year period. Obviously, you lose the Senate, you'll definitely do worse over a 4-year period. But this is a pendulum that swings back and forth. I mean, there's a churn. We focus on Supreme Court, but the bigger game is the lower courts. But there's a churn with that every president gets vacancies and every president gets to get judges in. Obama was bogged down for a while, but then they changed the rules and he ended up gangbusters 2013. And now that rule is going to be lessened for everybody, and so that pendulum is going to swing back and forth even faster. So how much do you really get out of putting your hopes for the judiciary on a guy like Trump when that's an ephemeral victory inherently?
Well, the good news is, and I was worried about this for a long time, Bill, because my fear, of course, was that, Trump will discredit the brand and that he's going to lose, and then Democrats are going to get like 3 or 4 Supreme Court justices, and any of the meager benefits that Republicans and conservatives got by playing ball with Trump will by far be outweighed. I now feel like President Kanye is going to continue appointing strict constitution, strict originalists and textualists and all that. So I'm not too concerned anymore.
How do you go from George Bush doesn't care about black people to MAGA? I think it was Jamie Weinstein who tweeted that Kanye may be the only person in the world who thought that George Bush is a racist and Donald Trump isn't. So I get Kanye's point. I mean, we've heard this from lots of people that Democratic Party takes black people for granted, and African Americans shouldn't have any loyalty. They should be independent thinkers and not feel like they have to have an obligation to vote Democratic. Those are all perfectly legit points. I mean, basic points. But I disagree with what Kanye is saying when he tweeted, Obama was president for 8 years and nothing in Chicago has changed. That is, I think, a gross oversimplification of what happened over the 8 years. But even if you believe that Obama was somehow a disappointment, what is independent thinking about? I'm not happy with Obama. Trump's the other guy. I'm going to be with him. I've still yet to see Kanye in his 1,000 tweets actually say what Trump has done that is good.
I'm starting to think Kanye may not be entirely sane or coherent. It's possible.
It's possible. Look,
he married into the Kardashian family. If that's any.
Well, his wife was trying to get him to get off of Twitter, so she's not the problem here. Forgive me if I'm taking Kanye a little bit too seriously at the moment, but he is raising certain
points. Taking Kanye literally, but not seriously at this point.
He's raising certain points that other African Americans or other conservatives have wanted to make, and Trump's obviously trying to use this to say, look, here's my black friend Kanye West. I'm not a bad guy for blacks, and so it's worth pointing out that the argument being made here is not being buttressed in any way.
Yeah, no, it's a bizarre, weird story. I will say, it is interesting. There was a time, I believe, when Donald Trump's actual number one best demographic was the black community. Like when before he became a birther, he actually had a really strong appeal to that demographic, which obviously he has totally pissed away. And then I also think it would be interesting if Republicans thought that African American voters were gettable, how much better and different the Republican Party might be too. So these are side issues. They don't directly address what is the weird thing is happening with Kanye. But
the one argument I can make in favor of Trump's approach to all this is he did a little bit better with black men than black women, and Hillary was denied enough African American support to emulate what Barack Obama had. She got hit from left and right about the Clinton era of the 1990s, which Trump certainly disingenuously fostered, and Russian bots fostered. And so, the one substantive thing Kanye said about Trump, essentially, that we have the same dragon energy, which is
tiger blood,
which is essentially saying that I like his machismo,
the cut of his jib.
If he can get even just a somewhat slightly bigger sliver of the black male community, that can be very advantageous to denying Democrats their more diverse coalition that they try to build.
I'd say a couple things. One, I can't speak to to the current generation, like millennials. But as a Gen X guy, a Karate Kid original kind of guy, it is true that like when we were coming up, Bill, the grunge era was happening, and there was this ethos which was like, we're not going to do the glam thing, we're going to keep it real, we're not about like we're sort of like, I mean, there was like a Gen Next ethos that I don't think appeals with someone like Trump. But in the hip hop community, at least of this time, there was a very entrepreneurial spirit that was alive that I think is, consistent, rap videos on yachts with beautiful women, scantily clad oftentimes, very showing off sort of conspicuous consumption. That was, at least when we were coming of age, that was sort of the ethos of the hip hop at that time. Trump would appeal more to that generation of African American folk than they would to you and me coming up in the sort of Kurt Cobain, Eddie Vedder era. Now, the interesting thing is, and was it who was the other rapper who came out and said that African Americans don't have to vote Democrat?
Chance the Rapper.
Right. So I think there is a danger that right now it is perceived as being uncool, unthinkable, unconscionable that African Americans would vote Republican. And this is even irrespective of Trump, right? It's just unthinkable. And if you do it, there's a price to be paid, right? You are sort of excommunicated out of that community. What if that changes? Like, could this create a permission structure whereby it's acceptable within the realm of possibility that you could be out as a Republican in the black community? That I think my guess is that this is not a harbinger of things to come, that this is just an anomaly. But if that were to happen, that would be a huge game-changing moment.
I mean, there've always been one or a couple African-American celebrities who have boosted Republicans, going back to Nixon.
Sammy Davis,
Pearl Bailey backed Gerald Ford.
I don't think they were in the zeitgeist in their prime the way Kanye is.
Well, perhaps
I could be wrong.
I don't think he's going to lead a huge swath of African American voters into the Republican camp. I do think there is residual resentment towards the Democratic Party. That again, I don't think it's widespread, but it's not non-existent. And to the extent that it lingers, and that folks like Kanye and Chance the Rapper are fostering it, that makes the job of maintaining that Democratic coalition even harder.
But this is why it's so insane and stupid that Donald Trump says and does racist things, because he could have potentially. I mean, look, I don't see Kanye becoming a big fan of Mitt Romney or Rick Santorum. You know what I'm saying? It's just not going to happen. But Donald Trump, for the aforementioned reasons, the celebrity thing, the fact that he has sex with porn stars, there are people within the rap community who actually, I don't think that they would have cozied up to a Rick Santorum who's talking about gay marriage, let's say, right? But I think Trump, in a way, would have been much more appealing. It is more appealing to Hollywood, to the hip hop community. He could have built a bridge, and if you're a Republican or a conservative who has lamented for decades and decades the fact that African Americans vote 90%, 90-some percent Democratic every time, this could have been an opportunity. Maybe something good could have come out of Trump being the Republican nominee. And yet it's, it is what it is.
I know you got family business to take care of. So we should probably wrap this up. But we both have the same thing to plug today.
The same interview with the same.
We both have podcast interviews with Jonah Goldberg for his new book.
And not only that, but Bob Wright, I believe that headline.
That's right.
Jonah has been doing the rounds.
Yes, he's a good solid rollout. But you can check out my podcast interview with him on New Books and Politics on the New Books Network, as well as Charlie Sykes. Again, all the Never Trumpers on my show. Charlie Sykes,
only the best.
How the right lost its mind. I talked to him this week. I will have a liberal guest for next week's show. But I did do back-to-back Never Trumpers this week. And what else do you have going on, Matt?
I want to recommend Joy Reid as your next guest. And delve into the Wayback Machine.
Maybe we should delve into that more on the next show.
Well, I do apologize for being a little flighty today with childcare issues. But if anybody feels if any stay-at-home dad knows what I'm going through, it's William Scher.
I do, sir. But good luck to you.
Thank you.
Muddle through the day.
Thank you. Follow us on Twitter at DMZ Show. Subscribe to my newsletter, Matt Lewis and the Newsletter. Check out Bill's interview. Yours is more recent than I interviewed Jonah last week, but
so much had changed between Friday and Monday.
I want to give Jonah credit. I've listened to him on Econ Talk. Mm-hmm. I've listened to him on Conversations with Crystal or Bill Crystal's podcast. Dude's got range. He could talk. He could have completely different interviews with different people. So I've learned different things from different interviews. It's not going to be the same. So check out Bill's interview. What's the name of your podcast?
New Books and Politics on the New Books Network.
You should rate and review that on iTunes, subscribe, download, all that good stuff.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Awesome.
All right, till next week.
Thanks. See you guys.
Bye.